periods like this, where we have an international pandemic, highlight just the ways in which people are literally living on the edge, and it shouldn't really be that way.
I mean, 20 years into my career, you know, I earn a living as a performer. I have a skill set that is diverse and varied. I work in South Africa and outside of South Africa, and I still am vulnerable. I still am on the treadmill of trying to find paying work, of trying to chase invoices, of trying to create stability out of a situation that is chaotic where my labor is not protected. And what has happened with the collapse of the gig economy is that it's forced the gears of my life to slow down, so that I can finally reflect on how toxic this situation is. And in that reflection, you know, is the realization that this is systemic. You can't outmanage a situation that is as toxic and as dysfunctional as this situation is. Many of us accept it because we need to survive.
It's interesting, and I want to draw a bit more on your personal experience. And of course, your life then becomes just a window into the lives of so many other artists who are doing well, who are known for their work, not just nationally, but also internationally. So when you speak about the impact and the responses that they have been from the state, speak to us about how specifically they've impacted you and the extent to which you've been able to gain any kind of support during this period.
So I'm a working, touring artist. I tour in this country. I also tour internationally. When the international lockdown started, myself and other touring artists could see what was coming because our international work was suspended, which is a polite way of basically saying that it's been cancelled indefinitely. If and when it will come back, we do not know. Eventually, when the president called for the social distancing mandate, our work in South Africa was suspended, was cancelled. Because if you cannot have gatherings with 50 people, it means that we can't perform, we can't do events. And it's not just limited to the people who are on stage. It's everybody who supports the value chain of the entertainment industry, of the arts. So it's the writers, it's the producers, it's the people who work in tech, it's the people who build the stages, it's the guys who do the lights, it's the drivers, it's the wardrobe people, it's the people who sell food at the gigs, you know, it's the hair people, it's the people who make clothes, you know. So my life was turned upside down. It's been now 3 weeks of the gears of my life being at an absolute standstill and me scrambling to get my clients to honor outstanding invoices. When the lockdown finally hit, you know, it's like the rest of the country caught up to where the artists have been for the last month, you know. Yeah. So in addition to having all of the work that was in my pipeline, you know, basically for the next 6 months to the end of the year, just, you know, halted. I've also had to spend the last 3 weeks scrambling to chase invoices from clients that I have done work for, you know, in a time period that goes from 2 weeks ago to 8 months ago. That is how we live in this country. I spend a lot of time scrambling to get jobs that will create cash flow in my life to accommodate the fact that I am subject to the payment processes of the institutions that I work for, who range from, you know, the biggest companies, banks in corporate South Africa and government itself. Their payment processes, honestly, they strangle artists, you know. I can only do so much to protect myself. I have very tight invoices that I send out that protect my labor. I demand 50% upfront, but there's only so much that I can do. I submit these invoices, and then I'm at the mercy of, you know, whatever their payment process is. I'm told after I've already submitted my labor that I have to go through vendor forms and supply chain, and, you know, it's a nightmare. And I've managed to be able to shield the blow of that nightmare by bringing in more work. But right now, I cannot bring in that work, you know? So, I mean, I've been on social media fighting with everybody from the banks to Anglo-American. The government could do a lot for us right now by honoring its own outstanding invoices. And this is not just for artists, but it's for everybody who is self-employed. It's for owners of, you know, SMMEs. It's for contract workers and artists and people in the creative sector, you know? If government just honored its own outstanding outstanding invoices. It would set the standard for corporate South Africa to be able to do the same. If they cannot do this in this moment of a pandemic, then it honestly shows that we are not a priority for them and that there's very little compassion built into their systems. Whether they realize it or not, that is true.
It sounds like an absolutely frustrating situation to be caught up in, and you aren't the only one who's been vocal. We've seen some other artists go online and talk about the kind of statements that banks need in order to approve even, a payment holiday, requiring letters from your employer, and yet you're self-employed. So how have you been navigating around those challenges, and have you had success? So are you finding that the system, after a while, is amenable, that there are concessions made, or are you pretty much in the same position that you were when you started these conversations?
I am not interested in a payment holiday because I am not interested in having my bond carried over, my debt carried over, and the interest compounded for me to find a mountain of debt at the end of this crisis when I have not earned any money. I have been saying over and over again that the banks, the utilities should freeze payments until this crisis is over. People look at me, like I'm a raving lunatic, but this is not without precedent. Other countries have done this, from huge economies like France to economies that are smaller than ours on this continent, like Uganda. And in a country like South Africa that is unequal, we are the most unequal society on earth. People are carrying black tax. For those of us who are working, we're not just working for ourselves, we're working for extended families and communities who rely on our money to survive. As this crisis escalates, we're going to get to a point in a couple of weeks where the numbers are going to be bigger and they're going to be concentrated in poor black areas, high density areas, our townships and communities, where people are dependent on us for survival. If you're putting us in a position where we have to choose between paying rent and buying food, that's an injustice. In the middle of a pandemic, that's cruelty beyond measure. And it's not as if it's impossible for us to do this, The banks of South Africa, you can count them on two hands and your feet. They can sit in one room and make this decision. I understand that we're also in an economic downturn. I understand that the banks have taken a blow, but that's also on the heels of years and years of corruption, So we're all in this. When we come out of this, when we come out of the financial crisis that will be escalated because of COVID, we'll all have to do the work of rebuilding this country. We cannot do that if we're all sitting here trying to figure out, how we're going to get through winter with shelter and lights and still be able to feed the sick and the hungry who are looking to us for support.
Lebo, I wonder, a department like the Arts and Culture Department, that particular minister made some announcements in terms of cushioning the entertainment sector in particular. Do you find that that has been helpful at all? Is the minister somebody that you think would be able to provide any kind of solutions right now?
I'm deeply disappointed in the responses by the Department of Arts and Culture. When the president gave the speech insisting on the social isolation mandate, he made no mention of arts and culture, which speaks to the fact that he was not provided with information, with analysis, with policy suggestions by the ministry. Following the social isolation mandate, which really hit us very hard, that suspended all of the gigs. The sector had a meeting. I don't know how it was decided who was going to be in that meeting, but the recommendations that were made at that meeting became the response that the minister gave after the lockdown. So many of those recommendations are no longer applicable because the social isolation situation and the lockdown situation are two different situations altogether. The other relief that was, or there's some funding that has been set aside by, I believe it's the Lotto, 150 million, which is their budget for the first quarter that they're willing to provide as relief. But that money is supposed to go to the arts and to sports. 150 million, I mean, it sounds like big money, but when you consider what it takes to put on a festival, you know, or what it takes to put on a big show, or what it takes to put on a massive match, you know, that money is just, it's the budget for a couple of events. There is no way that it is going to relieve the entire sector. What I'm very frustrated with right now is the fact that it seems on a much bigger level, the Department of Arts and Culture doesn't understand that its responsibility is to provide culture to the people of South Africa. It's not actually to regulate the sector or regulating the sector as part of it. But I mean, it's not the DAC's responsibility to stage events and hire us like an eventing company. It's the DAC's responsibility to make sure that ordinary people in this country are able to access to populate our communities, particularly our poor communities, with galleries, with theaters, with performance venues, and to make sure that, you know, there are artists in schools, that once the department is able to create an enabling environment for culture in this country to thrive, we will do the business of populating those spaces with the culture that our people need. Our people are in a position right now where we're locked in houses, right? People are consuming more culture than they've ever consumed before. We're sitting in our houses, reading books, watching television, listening to music. That's what we do. From the second that this lockdown started, artists in South Africa and around the world started posting our work online. So, I mean, we know what to do. We know that our job is to feed the people. We need to be supported in doing that job. We need our labor protected. And right now, I think the entire country, artists, everyone, it was very interesting to hear that the retail outlets are not paying rent. Why is anyone paying rent in the middle of an international pandemic where people cannot earn money?
Sure. Lebo Mashile, unfortunately we've run out of time, but thank you so much for your time tonight and for being a voice on such a crucial issue. We'll certainly